For RCR TV, I'm Sean Kinney, and welcome to HetNet Happenings, where we take a look at all things DAS, Wi-Fi, small cell, and much, much more.
CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business. Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Welcome back to HetNet Happenings. Our show this week is brought to you by our friends at CommScope, and we've got a good one for you this week. My colleague Martha DeGrasse, an editor here at RCR who specializes in the HetNet ecosystem, including DAS, Wi-Fi, small cell, and the other topics we discuss here on the show, had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Boris Galubovich, who's the director of product at TE Connectivity. They talked a lot about CPRI interface technology and also its applications to digital DAS deployments. In this first clip, Dr. Galubovich is going to give us some background on CPRI and talk a little bit about how it figures into DAS. Let's take a look.
I'm Martha DeGrasse for RCR Wireless News, and I'm here with Boris Galubovich. He is Director of Product Management for TE Connectivity. Boris made time to come by the Austin studios of RCR on his way back to the Bay Area. Boris, thanks very much for making the time
My pleasure.
today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're glad you could make it. Now, we hear a lot these days about CPRI, Common Public Radio Interface, and TE Connectivity has really been at the forefront of making this part of distributed antenna systems. So I'd like to start with a little bit of an explanation and definition. First of all, what is CPRI?
CPRI is an interface that has been around for a number of years to connect baseband processing units, or BBUs, from various OEMs to their remote radio heads. And we have taken that approach to use it now for DAS systems and remote radio heads. Now they are multi-operator, multi-band, multi-radio technology capable. And with that, we have really mimicked something that has been done for the core network, and we have taken it closer to the end user in, for example, public venues or outdoor DAS applications.
And we think that AT&T is the operator that has been the most vocal about supporting this. So can you just give us a few of the reasons in your mind that AT&T has really jumped behind this CPRI interface?
AT&T is interested in CPRI, and operators in general see the value in that because at the end, it really boils down to improve total cost of ownership. And CPRI, as I said, the technology was around for a number of years. The application is fresh. And in this application, it removes a number of pieces of hardware. So reducing the cost to reduce the number of pieces of hardware. That hardware takes space, so it takes less footprint, fewer costs associated with rent. And then finally, the hardware that is used to connect traditional DAS systems with the radio head and the DAS system is very power consuming because it's really used to reduce the power that comes out of a radio head and dump it into the air. And as such, it adds additional cost associated with cooling. So there's multiple avenues that come with simply the installation and the total cost of ownership associated with running that installation. But there's also much more commonality that comes with installing this equipment that is now very much like a radio head that people are familiar with.
Okay, so less power, less hardware. Specifically, what are some of the hardware elements that are eliminated versus a traditional DAS?
Not to be too technical, but it's fundamentally a traditional DAS is taking a radio head that is used to power an outdoor antenna, so tens of watts or more, that generates a lot of RF power. That is way too much RF power to put into a system that is used to drive an indoor DAS. That power needs to be dropped or combined in a way to be useful for use in a DAS system. That hardware becomes unnecessary, and all the associated costs with operating that hardware go away. So it's really a win for the operators. It's something that they see very quickly, and that's why we're seeing such a high degree of interest.
All right, Boris, thank you very much.
In that clip, you heard Dr. Galubovich talk a little bit about how DAS needs to support multiple carriers operating on multiple bands. Obviously, that has some repercussions in the type of technology that's deployed there in the field. So in this next segment, Martha and Dr. Galubovich are going to explore a little bit more how a more complicated deployment figures into CIPRI, and also the CapEx and OpEx implications. Let's hear that segment.
I'm Martha DeGrasse, and we're back with Boris Galubovich of TE Connectivity. We're talking about the digital DAS solution. Boris, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the installation, the infrastructure involved. I know that there's always a lot of fiber for any type of DAS installation, and particularly maybe with a digital DAS solution?
Fundamentally, fiber is really proportional to how much data people need to transport to the radio head. So the more sophisticated the remote radio head becomes, generally it can carry more information from the fiber to the air interface. And in our case, that is a multi-band, multi-operator, multi radio head, and as such, it obviously needs to provide that information. But fundamentally, the digital aspect of it is not a downside. It's actually an upside from a technological point of view because it taps in a lot of the building blocks that people commonly use for terrestrial fiber transport. And as that technology advances, we can really upgrade our gear to adopt new technologies. So fundamentally, because of that similarity in the transport, it actually provides a more seamless path of the integration to advances in technologies that come from standard telecom networks.
So multi-band, multi-operator, but obviously it would always start with probably one operator. So is the operator more likely to use all the bands or to try to bring in other operators?
So simplicity always comes when you deal only with yourself. However, having more operator from the get-go cuts down the cost from the get-go. So it's a little bit of a choice. Some choose to start by themselves, but generally, if the equipment will be used by multiple operators, more than one are there at the very beginning, and some joining later. Generally, I would say it comes only from the fact that it's harder to coordinate multiple parties than fewer parties. But the economics of a shared infrastructure piece of equipment really comes from having more parties on it. Generally, for our gear that is used in a remote radio head or a small cell application, it would be used from multiple bands starting from day 0 or day 1, and multiple radio technologies if applicable. So many operators still run 3G and 4G networks, so both of those can run concurrently on our equipment alongside multiple bands that an operator might own.
Okay, now you mentioned small cells. Do you have deployments here that are supporting small cells?
So we have deployments that are used in applications that people would associate as small cells. And it would be a single operator using all their spectral assets in a single enclosure. So that is our Prism, FlexWave Prism product line is geared towards that. For example, an urban area where an operator has 4, for example, bands, and they want to run them all in MIMO, they would be very well advised to use a Prism remote radio head in this type of application. And from a market aspect, that would be a small cell application that would be used with a OEM's BBU.
An OEM, but it has to be AlcatelLucent, right?
AlcatelLucent is our partner in the CIPRI interface. However, you can still use our equipment through a traditional RF interface, and in some markets we do that as well. There's no reason why not using analog interface from a technical, functional point of view, but from a financial point of view, from a total cost of ownership point of view, it's beneficial to use a CIPRI interface for the reasons of reducing the cost of equipment, operating space, and such.
Now, TE Connectivity has done a lot of the research and development work associated with CIPRI in collaboration with AlcatelLucent, a major equipment manufacturer headquartered in France. In this next clip, Dr. Galubovich and Martha are going to discuss that collaboration between the two companies, as well as how TE Connectivity was able to add CIPRI to an AlcatelLucent baseband processor. Let's take a look.
We're back with Boris Galubovich of TE Connectivity, and we're talking about CIPRI and digital DAS. Boris, so far AlcatelLucent is the one original equipment maker that has opened up the CIPRI interface to you. Can you just give us a little bit of information about your history working with that company?
We have a very close collaboration on various technology aspects with AlcatelLucent. And one of them is the CIPRI interface, where we got together and developed a way of connecting an AlcatelLucent baseband unit with our DAS system. And these are very close engineering activities between our team and the AlcatelLucent team. And it takes some time, but it is a great experience, and we are very excited seeing it come together and being received in the market as it's being received with such positive accolades.
And what do you think motivated AlcatelLucent to sort of give you the keys to the kingdom like that?
Well, it's a logical extension of taking a single band radio head and providing an operator with a choice in certain application to use a multi-band and multi-radio technology offering. And we are really here to make our customers successful. And as such, this was a win-win situation across the board.
Do you think others may follow?
I can't speak for others, but we are
hope.
very happy that we have gotten start with AlcatelLucent, and we were the first one to introduce it in the market.
Great. And do you see your competitors moving in this direction, trying to follow what you're doing?
Good ideas get often copied, so I would not be surprised to do so. But for us, this is only the beginning. We look at our collaboration with AlcatelLucent and the fact that we have a CPRI interface at the beginning of a road of using DAS systems as part of the HetNet environment, as an opening to using DAS as an integral part of the core network for distributing radio signals, and that the next opportunities will come from the CRAN type of applications that evolving, and we don't really know exactly to what end, but having this all digital connection all the way from the core network to the radio is really an enabling part.
Okay, well, that was going to be one of my next questions, was about your outlook for CRAN. So do you have anything more to share about that?
I think there's two things to it. Is one, having a digital interface all the way to the radio head opens up a seamless communication and control path throughout the network. So there's many possibilities that one can take from there. There will be initially probably small steps that are probably going to be less exciting from a purely technological point of view, but it's the beginning of a development path that will address multiple problems in operating the network. And I think fundamentally speaking, it's all about reducing the total cost of ownership from a operating complexity of the network, and having that become one network, one sort of big cloud, will be the future. And we have seen some of that in sort of the terrestrial networks, the IP networks, and we will see similarities being applied to the radio network.
All right, thank you, Boris.
In this final segment, Dr. Galubovich and Martha are going to discuss a little bit about centralized headends. And so this is a really important trend in the HetNet space right now. As networks continue to densify, it's really important to be mindful of the physical real estate that you're occupying. As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of CapEx and OpEx implications of centralizing hardware. Let's hear a little bit more from Dr. Galubovich on that.
We're back with Boris Galubovich. He is Director of Product Management at TE Connectivity. Boris, we think that operators are looking more and more at the centralized head end as they explore ways to bring connectivity to large venues and even to entire cities. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yes, that's a really interesting point. Is that both of those places have a limitation to space. Big venues and central head ends that are placed in big venues are often challenged by size. And in cities, that's similarly the case. Real estate is expensive. You take every major city, the space where you can put equipment is highly restricted. Well, one of the good things in cities is that the central office is becoming depopulated as quote-unquote classic telco equipment is becoming smaller. Some of that space can be repurposed for wireless. So that's a great opportunity. And using that space with equipment that is qualified for use in that space is key. So for that purpose, head-end equipment, like the host units that come for the Prism FlexWave platform, need to be central office compliant. And for that, we developed a NEBS 3 compliant host unit. So that opens up that the equipment can populate that space. So you have two elements. You got the central office that becomes available for small cell or DAS applications, and you have the compact, multi-band, multi-operator radio heads that can be placed around cities. So now the standard central office is available, the compact outdoor units are available, and the fiber plant can be reused that may be available from operators that has been deployed over the years. So finally, you ask what happens in the future. So the good thing is central office gear is becoming smaller, but as DAS or small cell gear follows the same technological curve, that gear also can become smaller and provide same performance in a smaller footprint. So as bandwidth usage out in the outside plant in the small cell application increases, central offices are likely to stay the right size for some years to come.
Okay, so the equipment's getting smaller, but what about the amount of fiber needed? Is that going up or staying the same?
So, excellent question. Even there, technology is our friend. Speeds per wavelength do increase over the years, and we went from less than 1 gigabit per second to 40 gigabit per second per wavelength. That technology can be reused in our digital DAS system for use in our multi-band small cell applications. So clearly there's a risk that fiber is never enough, but currently I would say that the increase in data rates available in the equipment will carry us for some time after the first installation.
When you talk to operators, do you sense a strong interest in where the fiber is, how much fiber is available, all that?
So in our business, we have the wireless business unit that I'm responsible for. I have counterparts in we call it in the fiber part of the business. There's a lot of synergy between our groups, and we look at very creative ways to reusing and multi-purposing the existing fiber plant for use with DAS small cell applications alongside with fiber optic data applications. And there's been a lot of fiber that has been deployed to fiber to the home applications, particularly in some parts of the US and outside the US. That fiber, with some clever technical choices, can be repurposed to use for small cell applications like the ones with our Prism remote radios.
Okay, so without going into too much detail, what are some of these clever choices and creative solutions?
Well, sometimes they're not that sophisticated, but they involve in using multiple wavelengths and reappropriating some of the wavelengths to be used for DAS applications and adding new wavelengths to be used for DAS applications. Sometimes you need to work around certain places in the distribution infrastructure that you have the right routing of those assets. But it's really technology that is available today, just putting it together in a usage-appropriate manner.
Excellent. Boris Galubovich, Director of Product Management at TE Connectivity. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that was my colleague Martha DeGrasse and Dr. Boris Galubovich from TE Connectivity. I hope that our viewers certainly feel a little more informed about CPRI and its applications in digital DAS. I know I certainly do. And I'd like to thank Martha and Boris for taking the time to do that interview, and I'd also like to thank our sponsor, CommScope. If I could put in a few plugs here at the end to keep up with me, Martha, and the rest of the RCR Wireless News editorial team, you can check out rcrwireless.com. And if you'd like daily telecom, IT, and ICT news delivered straight to your email inbox, I'd encourage you to sign up for our daily e-news blast. For lots of multimedia content as well as archived issues of this show and all of the other RCR TV productions, you can check out the RCR TV page or the RCR Wireless News YouTube channel. And we just recently had the grand opening of our studio here in East Austin, and we had a great musical guest come in to provide some entertainment. Her name's Emily Wolf. She's a real talented musician, singer, songwriter. And we're going to send the show off today with some of her work. So let's hear from Emily Wolf.
Well, I can't be LA, and I can't be New York, but that can be yours. And I can't be LA, that can't be New York, but that can be yours.
HetNet Happenings is a production of RCR TV. To reach Sean Kinney or to suggest a show topic for HetNet Happenings, you can reach Sean at skinney@rcrwireless.com. On Twitter at SeanKinneyRCR. To find out more about the latest in HetNet and all things wireless, dig into rcrwireless.com.